Rabbi Sai, welcome back to Yerushalmi Eruvin. We're holding at Perek Shmini Halacha Zayin, which is page 57a, Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. So, we're talking about getting your water on Shabbos into a courtyard from a little ditch or stream which passes through the courtyard. So, so you've got a stream or a ditch with a water going through the courtyard. You cannot get the water out to fill up your buckets on Shabbos because the ditch has got a din of a carmelis. Now you can't take from that into the courtyard, which is of course a private domain. So basically the water is coming from outside the chotzer, right? And it's going through and passing through and then leaving the chotzer. So what Chazal were masaken is you have to make a mechitza gvar asar tzvachim b'knisa v'yitzia. So as the water comes in to your courtyard, make sort of a wall on top of it. And then you're sort of designating a wall to sort of keep that water to be part of your courtyard. That's what you're doing. And again, as it leaves the courtyard. So therefore, as long as it's connected to outside, it's got a din of a carmelis. When you make a mechitza on top, again, we virtually bring it down, and as if it goes all the way down, and therefore seals your water, as it were, within your courtyard. Then it's considered separate from the water outside the courtyard, and it's as if it was always in from the beginning in this courtyard, and therefore it's got a din of a Shus Yachid. Rav Yehuda said, Maseh ba'ama shel Avel. Well, Avel is the name of a town. There was a stream which went through the courtyards in the town. They would take the water in the courtyards based on advice of the elders. Now they never made any mechitza as the water came in. So you see the walls of the courtyard on top of the water are considered mechitza. Right? There's no need. Basically, they never made a special mechitza. Right? It seems that the courtyard walls, that is good enough to separate the water from outside the courtyard. You don't have to make a special mechitza to allow you to get water from the stream. The Chachamim said back to him, there's no raya from there. There's another reason why they allowed it. There was not the depth. It wasn't really a carmelis stream. It wasn't a depth of 10 tfachim and wide 4 tfachim. So it wasn't a domain in its own right. It wasn't a carmelis. It was botel to the courtyard, and it had a din of a Shus Yachid. If, however, you have a shear of a depth of 10 and a width of 4, then it's got a din of a carmelis, and you can't take the water unless you make a mechitza as it comes in and as it goes up. Masnisa, our mission is talking about a case by Mukha Sarah, where it's 10 tfachim deep, or Rechava, and 4 tfachim wide, and then it's got a din of a carmelis. Ufbrutza mikan mikan, and it goes into the courtyard from one side, it leaves on the other side, and it's considered a carmelis. If it goes in and it doesn't leave, or it comes in, it's sort of coming from this reshus. It basically got a din of a Shus Yachid. You can get water. So if it says here, if it comes in and doesn't leave, or the beginning of its leaving is from this courtyard, it sort of leaves this courtyard. This is where it starts. Maybe it comes from underground and starts from this courtyard. Then you're allowed to take water even though you didn't do a mechitza. So now we're going to come to, what about a stream that's going through an alley, a mavoi, and it leaves it? And again, the wall of the mavoi is open where the water comes in or where the water leaves. How do we rectify the mavoi in this situation? So if it was open from one side where the stream comes in or where it leaves, you put either lechi or kara, the stick or the board, on one side where the gap is, like any mavoi which is open from one side. If the entry where the Omar comes in, the stream, and where it leaves is both open, you either put a lechi or kara on one side, and you make the other gateway sign. You have the Tzuras Pesach on the other side. No. Tzuras Pesach is your doorway, your gateway. Lechi is a stick, a vertical stick. Kara is the board going across. So you can either put lechi or kara on one side, and you make a Tzuras Pesach on the other side. And that's like a mova which goes from street to street, and that's how you rectify it. But there's no heter by making mechitzas tuluyas like 10 tfachim high on a stream coming in and out. But we did learn this with chadzer, because mechitzas tuluya, remember, it doesn't reach the ground. So it only helps to fill water from a courtyard. But a mavoi, however, we're not going to allow mechitzas tuluya for that. You need the lechi, kaira, and Tzuras Pesach. Now back to the din in our Mishnah. A stream that's going in the courtyard, and the stream is 10 tfachim high and 4 tefachim wide, and it's going all the way along the courtyard, right? And it might be go through the courtyards, etc. And there might be houses, on different sides of the stream, and each one has to maybe make an eruv on their own. Basically, if you've got this big stream in between, then each house on the either side, they can't carry things to one another. They've made their own eruv. They can't join together. So how can the people in the courtyard get the same water from the stream if they can't join together? Because you end up with two courtyards who never made an eruv one with the other. The water belongs to both of them. How can they both take water from this? You had all the houses on one side of the stream, and there were no houses on the other side. There was no other courtyard which was forbidding rishus. Now, the stream, we said, if it's 10 wide, 10 deep and 4 wide. What about if you don't have those shiurim? So one thing is clear: if it's if it's not 4 wide, you can take from it, and you can get water from it, because it's not rishus in its own right. It's like a chatzah which is in the chatzah, and it's a rishus yachid. If it's 4 wide but not 10 deep, again, you're allowed to carry it because it's not 10 deep. It's not considered rishus in its own right. But malos, are you allowed to fill water for a courtyard from a stream which is not 10 tefachim deep? Maybe you shouldn't do it, because when you take water, we don't know how deep it is. People might think it's 10 deep, you see, and they'll come make a mistake and say, oh, you can fill it even when it's 10 deep, because they might think it's 10 deep. Rav Chinna, he said, mutter, it's permitted to get water from it. Rav Mana Amar Asi said it's forbidden. Masnisa Pliga, the Brisa seems to argue on Rav Mana. Why? Amrulai, the Chachamim said back to Yehuda, he brought a rye from a stream which is in the town of El. They would get water even though they never made a mechitza. Now, why did they allow it? It wasn't a big size. It was neither 10 deep or 4 wide. And it's mashma. The reason of the het is because both shurim were lacking. Didn't have 10 or 4. If it was 10 deep but not 4 wide, also, is that forbidden? Now, no, not necessarily. That might be permitted, as we said. It must be, as long as one of them's lacking, it's permitted. Right? The term of the heter, because it was, in that case, it was either it wasn't 10 deep or it wasn't 4 wide. Even if it's 4 wide and not 10 deep, mutter, you're allowed to take water from it. And basically, it's not like Ramana, he forbade you to take it in that situation. That's a question on Ramana. So the Gemara says, well, look, the story was what it was. In that particular stream, it wasn't 10 deep, it wasn't 4 wide. And therefore they mentioned both things it didn't have. It could be the heter depends on the fact they didn't have 4 wide. Who says that, either one or the other? Not necessarily. Don't start being medayik from the brisa that even if it's 4 wide, it's still permitted. Maybe not. Maybe it's not. Maybe the main heter is the fact that it's got to be 4 wide and maybe not on the depth. So, it could be that, yeah, there's no hechrach to say that either one missing would make it fine. Okay, halacha ches. So we're still talking about getting water on Shabbos. Ketzutzra, which is like a balcony, right? Which is above the sea. So you've got a house at the edge of the sea, and you've got sort of a balcony spreading out over the sea. Now, you cannot get water out of it on Shabbos because you cannot put your bucket straight down through a hole in the ground of this balcony to get water from the sea, because the sea is a kamelis and the balcony is your rishus yachid. You can't take on Shabbos from the kamelis to the rishus yachid unless they made. Now, what they have to do is, again, mechitza gavaya asar tefachim. You have to make a sort of enclosed area at your we'll see. At your balcony, we'll see. You mean to make a wall, 10 tvachim. It says here, bein melamalam, whether above the water, so it's connected from underneath the balcony, going round, and then we extend it virtually as if it's going good achis all the way down to the sea, and therefore it becomes one domain. So then, when you take the water out, it's coming through your rishus onto your balcony. Bein melamatan, or you are putting it all the way down. You're extending the actual mechitza, and it goes into the water. It's actually submerged into the water from under the balcony. And then it's going good asik, and it's going straight up. And since everything is done into one rishus, you're allowed to take water from the sea in that situation. You might also have a situation with 2 balconies, one on top of the other. right? And they're above the sea, and they belong to two different people. Each one belongs to a separate person. And you've got a hole in each balcony, and the holes are exactly underneath the one above. Yeah. So you can put your bucket through your balcony, carry on down through your friend's balcony, all the way into the sea. Now, if they made a mechitza for the top balcony, but not for the bottom one, they're both forbidden to get water from the sea because you are sending your water through someone else's reshus, and that you can't do. Until they get together the bottom people can't get water because they don't have mechitza. The top one who made a mechitza can't get water through the hole underneath because they never made an eruv chatzeros with a balcony underneath. And they can't take from the bottom one because that's tilted from another reshus to another reshus where they've not made an eruv. Now, if they make a mechitza, back to our, what do we say in our Mishnah then? So if you have a mechitza underneath the balcony, that's how you can get water from the sea. Now, the mechitza should be, he's saying, it should be submerged into the water the height of the bucket that you are using. So it should be noticeable you're making a mechitza to allow the filling of water. But if you make it above the water surface and not submerged, he says it doesn't help. Ravuna said, he says, if you made the mechitza under the balcony, and it's not actually under the balcony, there's a bit of a gap there between the mechitza and the balcony, then you need the beginning of it, a distance of at least 3 tvachim from under the balcony, and then it's considered connected. So it should be within 3 tvachim of the floor of the balcony, because otherwise it's not noticeable that you're doing it for the sake of filling water. So he says, you have a balcony above the sea. Percha says maziva. You can make a hole in its floor, mishalshel, and you bring the bucket down, and and you get water. He says even if this brisa holds, you don't even need a mechitza. Now we'll see why. Okay. We'll see. This opinion holds we don't see mechitza. We'll see why soon. Now he says the hole must be big enough 4 by 4 tvachim. Mechitzas help if you have a surrounding an important area. An important area is 4 by 4 tvachim. So they've got to be an area of 4 by 4 tvachim to have mechitzas. Now we've just got a square with a hole in it. We're saying you don't need a mechitza now according to this. Now why is that? Now, you also need to have a balcony, mechitza surrounding it, let's say a height of 10 tvachim, and we imagine they're extending downwards, and therefore you can get your water from the bucket, even though you didn't make them for that. So what's happening is we're sort of extending some of the balcony and sort of bending it round to go down. That's what we're doing. You might not even have. He says here, Chanani ben Akavia, he holds the ground of the balcony kuf v'gud. That means you can take the land of the balcony and imagine it's bending downwards, and it makes a mechitza around your hole. Do you understand? We're bending it down. Literally. We're bending it down, and it's still mechitza tuluya. It doesn't reach the surface of the sea, and we're saying good achis as well. Our Mishnah needed a proper mechitza around the hole. Our mechitza doesn't hold all this, right? And our mechitza holds. Our Mishnah holds. It's going to be noticeable. It's made clearly for getting the water. No, it doesn't have to be made for filling the water. He relies it based on the balcony floor, which wasn't made for any mechitza at all, right? And he's using the balcony floor and imagining it's bent downwards going down. That's the way he understands it. So, now, who is this? We explained okay. So he mentions the idea of it should be a shir mechitza. It's mechitza surrounding an area of 10 tvachim, and then we say good achis. Taman Amri, in Bava they said, I feel eight mechitzas gvas asara. Even they explained Rav Chananya ben Akavia that no, they don't have to be 10. These mechitzas that you're making up don't have to be 10. But it's got to be a sizable area, so it's got to be 4 by 4. Now he says here, 4x4 amas. Before we had 4x4. What did we mention? 4x4. About tfachim by 4 tfachim. Right, that's what we quoted before. And now in the notes here, it's saying 4x4 amas. And he says 4x4 amas. Now whether, I don't know if that's, maybe I might be checking that. Maybe that's right. And we imagine the base of the balcony around the hole as if it's bending downwards and makes a mechitza around the hole like a filter where you strain the wine from the sediment, which is put on the whole of the vessel, where you pour down the wine and the mechitzas bend around it. And basically you have, he seems to stress here this idea of 4 amas according to this, which is 24 tvachim. And the hole itself is a width of 4 tvachim. So yeah, the whole area is 4 amas, and the hole is 4x4 tvachim. Do you understand? And then you have like 10 tvachim on each side, and when we imagine that they are bent downwards, you have mechitzas of 10 tvachim.
So it's kof and yeah?
It's what?
Bending and it's
yes, exactly. It's angud achis. So you've got 4 in the middle, which is the hole. You've got 10 on either side of floor, and we're taking that 10 and bending it downwards and extending it all the way downwards. He goes back to the idea of getting water through the bucket. He says, you're allowed to get water from the sea, but you can't throw it back. He says, when they got together, we'll appoint you on the community. Yeah. What did he mean here? Oh yeah, when we approve everyone, we'll approve you. He's laughing at him. He's saying a joke to him. There's no such thing. Of course, if you can get water out, you can throw it back. No, he said, where's the praise? Yeah, he should be appointed as a chacham. There is a reason for a difference. You're allowed to get water out because you're getting it through the hole, through your area, which is your rishus of the balcony, rishus yachid. But don't throw it out because the water you throw out goes from there to beyond the wall. You're throwing it who knows where. It seems you're not throwing it through the mechitzas. No. And it's rishus yachid to an area which is beyond the mechitzah. You'll just throw it out and it'll go into a kamalis. Now back to the din of Rechanani ben Akabya, that you're allowed to fill water even if you didn't make mechitzas because we bend it across and bend it down. He said this din with the Kinneret, so the mountains surround it. It's considered mechitzas. And since the sea is surrounded by mechitzas, he was lenient to get water from it. But the sea, which is not mukam mechitzas, Rav Chananu and Akabi agrees to the Chachamim that you cannot fill water from it unless you make a mechitza around the hole. Okay. Rav Elazar Shal Rav Yochanan. Now this is something else. Mechitzas through the mountains surrounding an area. So Rav Elazar Shal Rav Yochanan. Ahan Piyusrus. You have a path. Which is not straight, but it bends around the mountains. Right? What's the din? On Shabbos you threw from that path into the street. The street into it. Do we say, look, it's between the mountains, they're like mechitzas, they're like rishus yachid? Typical Yerushalmi question, right? So the mountains will make this place into rishus yachid. And you're throwing from the street or the other way, maybe a chayiv, maybe I saw rishus or maybe no. This way, this road is like a rishus rabbim. Amalei says, according to what you want to say, it's surrounded by mountains, the private domain, then there's no ever Rishus Rabbim, because every place is surrounded, maybe far away by mountains. Rishlakish said, Rishus Rabbim has to go all the way from one end to the other, open on both sides. You got mountains at the end, then it's like they're walls, and therefore they remove the din of Rishus Rabbim. Now, Rish Lakish doesn't actually fit in with what he says elsewhere. Muchlav Shidduch Rish Lakish. Da'ama, who said, Ein Rishus Rabbim b'olam hazeh, ela la'asid lavoi. Elsewhere he said that no, there's no Rishus Rabbim at all. Shenev says, Kol Gei Yinaseh. It says that the mountains will become low and the lower areas will become high, and then the whole world will be straight. But nowadays there's mountains and valleys, there's no Rishus Rabbim, and that doesn't fit in what he said before, that you've got to be mefulish from beginning to end. It sounds like if it is mefulish, it's Rishus Rabbim, even though there are mountains and so on. Just before we move on, I'll just see the notes here. So, why we're saying it's, this derech is not considered Rishus HaYachid, I mean, it's surrounded by mountains. She says, in Bavli we find various svaras to say Rishus HaRabim in an area surrounded by mountains is not Rishus HaYachid. One reason is because we say the Rabim are Mavatel Mechitza. The Mechitza, where many people go by, is not considered a Mechitza. That's brought Machlokes Tanaim. Also Mechitza, which is done b'dei Shamayim, a natural Mechitza. And then the Rabim are Mavatel Mechitza. Or also the mountains that surround this big area, it doesn't become Rishus HaYachid because no one can see himself within the Mechitzas. Or these mechitzas are not ma'akev, they don't stop the people passing through them. So these various svaras, mechitza which is not made by man, and they're surrounding a massive area, they're not mechitza to mevatel Rishus HaRabim. Some say if the story is where the path goes around the mountain, maybe it's not Rishus HaRabim because it's not an easy use, it's not an easy path to follow. Therefore the Rabbim are not mevatel that mechitza going around the mountain. Alright, let's carry on. The following Mishnah argues on Rish Lakish, seems to go against him. We've learned Ezehi Rishus HaRabim. What is a public domain as far as Tumah is concerned? But Safik Tumah Rishus HaRabim is Tahar. Shuvile Beis Gilgal. This is an area in Eretz Yisrael where they had a mountain there and so on. So these paths on this hard hollow, they bend around. They're Rishus HaYachid l'Shabbos. They're not considered a public domain as far as Shabbos because it's very hard to go on them. But they're still considered Rishus HaRabim l'Tumah because many people go on these paths. So it sounds like this shvil, this particular base Gilgal shvil, is not considered Rishus HaRabim. But other ways where people like to walk, even though you've got mountains everywhere, they are Rishus HaRabim. That's not like Rish Lakish. And it's a very good question, and we have no answer. Okay, back to the words of Hanan ben Akavya. And we brought a sugya in Masechet Sukkah, which is connected. Now, Mechitza Tuluya doesn't reach the ground, but it's still kosher with sukkah. The one we're going to bring is that. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi, when he said Mechitza Tuluya, this Mechitza hanging down is kosher, Elilin and sukkah, as far as sukkah is concerned, Avalin and Shabbos, after Rabbi Yossi, even with Rabbi Yossi agrees that it's not considered a Mechitza. With sukkah, he's a mitzvah to say, he's lenient to rely on a Mechitza going down. Yeah, it's not reaching the ground. But not on Shabbos, which is severe, which is an Issa Skila. So it's all very well, Mechitza helps Benatera, but Shabbos is more severe. They're machmir not to rely on the Mechitza Tuluya, but Sukkah they weren't machmir. Okay. Mila said, Rav Chanina Amra, but the words of Rav Chanina, we say, Aflin and Shabbos. No, even as far as Shabbos as well. Rav Chanina, Shil time Bali Tzipayah, an officer came to Tzipayah, but Talu like Gitoyos. They put various sheets, which they hung on poles, to make a Mechitza, to allow carrying there, if they'll need to carry Shabbos anything for this officer. And these sheets didn't reach the ground, they were Mechitza Tuluya. And so still, and he allowed them to carry it between these sheets, because Shidras Aviv, like his father Rabbi Yossi, that Mechitza Tuluya helps on Sukkah, and the same thing it helps on Shabbos. So you see, according to Rabbi Chanina ben Yossi, Mechitza Tuluya helps even on Shabbos. Now Shmuel Rabbi Yitzchak proves, like the second opinion, Rabbi Yossi allows it even on Shabbos from another Amora. Rabbi Yossi Bun Shem Shmuel Rabbi Yitzchak asked Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, Rabbi Chanina. The words Rabbi Yossi, which we said is like the name of Chanina, his father. Rabbi Yossi allows Mechitza Tuluya even on Shabbos. Tarvei and Pligi. Then they both argue al Shiddas Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said no. Rabbi Yossi never said it's still on Shabbos. Da'ama Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, they said, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi ben Chanani ben Akavya Shlosh and Amar Davar Echad, they all said that Mechitza Tuluya helps even with Shabbos. And that Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina explained his words, Rabbi Yehuda, the Gesharim, so three people held Mechitza Tuluya helps on Shabbos. Who are they? Let's see. Rabbi Yehuda, the Gesharim Mefulashid. Now this is Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah later on. You have a bridge which is going across the street. You have walls on either side of the street. Yeah, so you have two walls and you have a bridge. Now, you're allowed to carry under it, according to Yehuda, as a Rishus HaYachid, even though you only have two walls. Because he says, we say Pi Tikra, the edge of the bridge extends down, and therefore you have an enclosed area from four sides. And therefore you have four mechitzas, and that's Pi Tikra, that the roof on the side extends downwards. Even though it's only a Mechitza Tuluya, there's no real Mechitza on the other side. There's two walls and that's it. But we're extending the side walls down, and that, even though they don't reach the ground. Rabbi Yossi Hoda Sukkah. Rabbi Yossi who allows Mechitza on Sukkah, and the same thing with Shabbos, and that Rabbi Yossi is Mashra Mechitza even in Shabbos. Rabbi Chanan ben Akabi, the Tadi Rabbi Chanan ben he hit Shlosha Dvarim. He allowed three things. Hite Katsusra. He allowed you to take water from the sea through a hole, even though, as we said, you never made a mechitza going downwards. He relies on the actual balcony floor, as we spoke about. To get a mechitza to learn, it doesn't reach the ground. But Adsa Shabayom, he allowed to put fruit, which is like the waste of pulses and so on. We've got a bit of moisture, and he's allowing you to put this fruit in this area of pulses. You're sort of hiding the fruit in the pulses. There's a bit of moisture there, but it's not making the fruit susceptible to receive tumah. You're allowed to hide your fruit to keep your moisture in the fruit. Yeah, so you're putting it in this thing, and he allowed you to do that. He allowed them to bring home from the bathhouse the various towels and so on, which they dry themselves after washing, where there's no problem of haitzah, rishus. Even though it's moist, he wasn't worried you'll forget and you'll start squeezing it. So various other things he allowed. Some say he allowed the actual drying, not bringing it to his home. Okay, now, the Gemara comes back to the Sefer of our Mishnah, the balcony, one above the other, belonging to two people. So if they don't make an Eruv together, then you can't take through the bottom one, because they didn't make an Eruv together. And you can't take from the bottom one, or from the top one to the top one, to the bottom one. So we bring a member on this. That which you're saying, that you cannot, the top one can't get water, that's only where you're between the two balconies, getting water through the hole in the bottom balcony, which is corresponding to the hole in the top balcony. You're using the same hole going straight down. And you're getting a bucket from the hole of the top through the hole in the bottom to the water. So the bucket is going within the bottom balcony, and it's carrying from one to the other, which is forbidden without Revei Chatzeros. If, however, you're using water not through the bottom hole, but through passing your bucket beyond the balcony, right? You're making mechitza a bit extended outwards, and you're not going through the bottom domain, then mutter, then you're allowed to get water for the top people, even though the bucket goes near to the bottom balcony. That doesn't matter, because it's not going inside. There's no tilta rishus to rishus. The Tari Kate, also we've learned in a brayso, shalosh ketzutzrai zu agabazu. Imagine you have three balconies, one on top of the other, and on various floors. And the top one and the bottom one belong to one person, and the middle one belongs to someone else. And they didn't make an Eruv together. So the guy at the top has also the bottom one, but the middle one is someone else. You cannot go from the bottom one to the top one through the middle one, because that's someone else's rishus. You can go straight from the courtyard, from the bottom balcony to the top balcony, and the other way around, straight from the bottom balcony to the top one, and you don't have to worry about it. You're not going through the middle domain, you're going between the two balconies, top and bottom, and even if the tiltle is near to the air of the middle one, that's okay. Yeah. He says the kavanah of the Sefer of the Brayso is but that which you're saying you can't carry from the top one to the bottom one through the middle one, that's when you're taking bibifnim, through that hole of that middle balcony. However, if it's beyond the hole or nearby mutter, then it's permitted. Rabbi Zirama, he said, also. He said, whether mibachutz, but whether you are, the tilted is beyond the middle one or nearby it, is still forbidden. He says, taking the airspace near to it, he doesn't like that, not like Rabbi Yossi. Now, what we said, which is permitted, that's only the tilted is not close to the middle one. You've got to be well away from the middle one. The following brayso argues on Rabbi Yitzchak. He goes against his words. You are allowed to take water from the courtyard, from let's say to a top floor of a building. So bottom floor in a courtyard, and you've got a top floor in a courtyard. You're allowed to take kederas basa. You take some meat and you put it al gabe ziz on a ledge. It's all 6 outs from the building outwards. You're sort of leaving your pot on it on this ledge, which is a low down ledge, and it's cooler there, and you don't want it to get hot in the heat. But in Haisa Chalaim, if, however, someone else had a window, bentayim, let's say between your top floor, and you have a ledge, but someone else has a window in between, shelabat tvachim, or 4x4 tvachim, then also, then you cannot put your pot from the attic to the top floor to the ledge close to the airspace of this guy who's got his window there. You're not allowed to carry from one domain, his domain, to another of his domains, from the attic to the ledge, through the rishus of someone else who's not joined together with. So you're not allowed to carry through the avir close to someone else's rishus, because you're not taking the pot through the window, but it's nearby. Now, what does Yerushalmi Eruvin do to this brayso? How's he going to explain it? According to him, you're allowed to take through the air close to someone else's rishus. So the Gemara answers, he will explain that Bryce is talking about a case where the window and the ledge were parallel, one next to the other, and therefore the ledge is the rishus of the owner of the window, because it's much easier for him to use. And it's talking about where the top one wants to lower his pot from his house to the courtyard, which belongs to him, through the ledge, but the ledge belongs to the owner of the window, and therefore he's actually carrying rishus of shus through someone else's rishus. But we're not talking about where he's bringing it through the air close to someone else's rishus. He's actually taking it through someone else's rishus, and that's why it's a problem.
Because there's no Eruv.
Because there's no Eruv with the person who owns the window. Okay, how long have we done so far?
Continue.
Yeah? Okay. So now, taking water to Rishus Yachid on Shabbos. Now we're talking about pouring water from a Shabbos from Rishus outside. A courtyard which is less than 4x4 amas. Now, you should not be throwing water down to Yadayim, washing vessels. The water's going to end up leaving your Rishus. You only have 4x4. This water, you're pouring it down here, it's going to go straight out. Unless they make some sort of water container, and it can hold 2 seah of water at its point. So it can hold 2 seah of water before it reaches the opening and it will start overflowing. So it's got to be able to hold that amount of water. And then, now eventually the water will overflow and will leave your rishus, but that's fine. You're going to have an area where you can go to within your rishus. The fact that it overflows and carries on going out is not a problem. Now this din is, bein mibifnim, whether your big sort of cesspit, as it were, whether it's inside your courtyard, or bein mibachutz, or it's outside, like in the street next to your courtyard. Ella shebebachutz. If, however, the pit is outside, sorach likma, so you have to cover it. You have to sort of cover up this pit. All right? Depends where this pit is. It becomes a mokum patur, you see, if you are covering it. And you're allowed to carry in it from a private domain. Right? If, however, it's in your courtyard, then you don't have to cover it. But if it's outside, you have to cover it. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he said, Biv, you have, let's say, a stream for your wastewater, which is going along the length of the roof or courtyard into the street. Shuhu kamor, which is covered over arba amas, rishus harabim. So it's covered over for the first 4 amas, which is in the street. You can put water into it on the Shabbos. Even if this sewer, as it were, carries on a roof, 100 amas, don't pour straight into this sewer. You can pour it on the roof, and eventually it will flow into the sewers over there. So don't pour it straight in, but pour it nearby, and eventually it goes there. You have a porch, as it were, or a courtyard. This is a building. It's got a roof, and it's like an entry to the house, and it's next to the courtyard. Misafim arba amas. They join up together for the share of 4x4. So if this courtyard itself is less than 4x4, but it's got a 4x4 together with a sort of porch leading into it, then you're allowed to pour water there even without this pit. Shtei diyatos, you have 2 roofs, let's say, on the people of the courtyard. So you have 2 floors, 2 top floors, zu keneged zu, and they are parallel one with the other. Between them, there's a courtyard less than 4 amas. So you need to make a pit to allow the pouring of the water in the courtyard. On Migsasa, And the people of one of the top floors, Asuuka, they made their sort of pit, their cesspit, to hold the Sasayim close to their attic, close to their floor, to allow them to pour the water. Or Miksasan, the people on the other top floor, Asuuka, they never made this container. So Esha Asuyoka Motorin, the ones who did make the container are permitted to pour their water. Esha Asuuka Asuyoka, the ones who didn't are not allowed to.
Right.
Now, a courtyard where the shear is 4 by 4 amas, you're allowed to pour water even without making a gumma. The reason is, in the Mishnah's mashma, if it's 4 by 4, you could pour water even without a gumma. So the Gemara explains, Shiru Tashmish Adam, when they worked out how much water you use, people with your household in one day, you use a sasayim, 2 sa of water. And Abba Amas, 4 by 4 amas, Mavliya sasayim, will swallow up, will take in, absorb that sasayim of water. Therefore, if you pour water of that into this courtyard, you don't intend that it's all going to flow into the street. It can get absorbed in your little area, and therefore, even if in the end the water did go into the street, you're not even on the Yisr, and therefore they allow you to pour water into this courtyard on Shabbos. Now, we said in the Mishnah, a courtyard which hasn't got 4 by 4 amas, the pit that's required to allow you to pour water needs to be big enough to hold a sasayim 2 sa of water. And the Gemara brings the machlekes, 2 machlekes Tanaim about this. Nikva ha'uka, right? By the way, 40 sa is around 195 litres. So 2 sa is a 20th of that. So roughly a 20th of 200 litres, around 10 litres, something like that. Nikva ha'uka, if there is a hole in your pit and it can no longer hold sasayim of water, and the water in the gumma goes out through the hole into the street, you don't have to close up the hole. You can just carry on using it. Because despite now, some of the water will go outside. Some say, no, you need to close up the hole. If you don't do it, you can't pour the water. If it got filled with water before Shabbos, some say, you have to empty it before Shabbos. Otherwise, the water you pour will go straight into the street. Some say, some say you don't need to do it. There's one Tanu paskin to be lenient in both cases, and one Tanu was strict in both cases. The one who says you have to close up the hole, he forbids you to pour water to the courtyard if the gumma is full. And for the same reason, in both cases there was a gumma which could have held the water, but now it can't. And if you pour water there, it's going straight to the street. Mandam, the one says, you don't have to close up the hole. He holds mutalishbach. You can pour water to the courtyard even if it's got full. And for the same reason, he says the gumma, look, it can hold it. So you can pour water even if now it can't hold it, it's fine. This is what Rabbi Yodi, your father, held on this. So he also said that the two machlokes are connected. At the same time, I'm arguing on both prices. Right? Can you pour? Can you not pour? Do you have to close up the hole? Do you not have to close up the hole? Now back to the din in our Mishnah. A courtyard which hasn't got 4 by 4 amas, you need to have this pit. And if it's got 4 by 4, then you don't need a pit. If the courtyard is slanty from like its inner point towards the street, so it's at a slant and the water's going to drain away. Even if it's more than 10 amas also, you can't pour water without a pit. The water was definitely going to go into the street before it starts getting absorbed in the ground.
How big is it?
Yes, ma'aseh. Well, even if it's big.
It's much bigger.
And it's still a problem. Water's going to... But now we're saying, look, if it's at a slant, that the water's just going to go straight away into the street, then he says there's a problem. Right. If, however, if the slant is going into the courtyard from the street, even less than 4 should be okay. What are we talking about? It's an equal height, equal level. So if it's less than 4, you need to have a pit, and if it's 4 by 4, then you don't need a pit. Now, Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish argue separately elsewhere about a courtyard which has got 2 different height levels. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the 2 different heights can't join for amas to allow you to pour water there. But Shlokish, how they do join if the top one is not so noticeably different in height from the bottom one. So, Masnisa Pliga Rabbi Yochanan. Our Mishnah seems to argue in Rabbi Yochanan. We said in the Mishnah, the courtyard and the gatehouse join up, let's say the porch, join up for amas to allow you to pour the water. Now usually the asadra, like the porch, is like a bit higher than the ground of the courtyard. And nevertheless, the Mishnah says it joins up for the shear, and that's not like Rabbi Yochanan. So Pastor, are you allowed to? No, it's not higher. But Shaveh is the same height. Masnisa Pliga, the following brisa argues on Rish Lakish, because on Mirpeses Hagag ve'Achatzer, like the gatehouse and the porch, whatever, and the roof, they all join up for Arba Amas. So a roof, it depends if there's different heights of a structure, and they also join up for Amas. Now, even Rish Lakish agrees that if the top part of the courtyard is higher noticeably from the bottom bit, they don't join up. The Brisa seems to say a roof can join up. Now, the roof must be nowhere near. No. Again, it's a roof which is a level height to the courtyard. So basically, they're like Hanof, right? We got the buildings on different heights. So the roof on here is actually level to the courtyard over there. I will prove it to you that that's the case because we learned in the Brisa the house and the porch and the courtyard, they don't join up. So how can that explain with the ratio of the Brisa which says they do join up? So you have to say that's where they're not level. When the ratio is talking about where they are level, there must be that. And therefore the Brisa, you see that's like the Pirush. It depends how close they are in height. Now, Reb Ben Yaakov allows you to pour the sewage into the stream, the Biv, which is covered the first 4 amas as it leaves into the street. They both said one thing. If the drains, the sewer is covered 4 amas in the street, so it's got a din of makom patur. You can pour water. They said, even if the biv is carried on gag even if the sewer carries on the length of the roof or courtyard 100 amas, you shouldn't pour water into this stream. Reb Meir in the following brisa we've learned, you have pipes which are coming from a courtyard into the street. And the ones in these towns are very big and they can hold a society of water, these massive drains. It's got holes and the water that way can leave into the street. You can pour water in. That's the view of Reb Meir. The Brisa continues, the Chachamim forbid until you block it up. Basically, you're going to close up the hole so the water doesn't go into the street. So Reb Meir fits in with the words of Reb Ben Yaakov. In our Mishnah, you're allowed to pour water into this sewer, which is covered for 4 amas, the first 4 amas in the street, because these pipes are carrying 4 amas, or even more into the street. According to the Chachamim, it's like the Chachamim in our Mishnah, they forbid you to pour straight into the sewer, right? Even if it's covered. Yeah, they don't allow you to do that. Now, we said in our Mishnah, the Chachamim forbid you to pour water straight into the pipes, the sewers, but they allow you to pour it on the roof, and eventually it gets there. The Tani came with him, if you had a sort of a drain which is carrying on the whole length of the roof, and the water from the roof goes down into the drain, and from there goes into the street, mutter, then you're allowed to pour water on the roof on Shabbos. If it's a rainy season, mutter, again you're allowed to pour water on the roof in any situation. If, however, you've got the pipes where the water goes through into the street, then on the roof, also don't pour the water on the roof on Shabbos the rest of the year when there's no rain. So if there's you've got the drains going down, he says don't pour water on the roof. And he says here, it seems the water in the pipes go into the courtyard and from there into the street. So you can pour the water there, but the water in the pipes in Iras goes straight to the street. So don't pour water there. So it depends, are they going in the courtyard or going in the street? All right. If it was a private area, you're allowed to pour water on the roof the rest of the year. Basically, the issa to use these pipes is maris ha'ayin. So there's no problem people seeing you, the water going from the pipes to the street, it should be permitted. And this idea that when no one sees you is okay, is not like Rav. And we've seen many times in Kilayim towards the end, where Rav held, well, even if people don't see you, it's still forbidden. Maris ha'ayin is still forbidden. And Yerushalmi completely rejected that idea and brought 7 proofs against it. And Hadar Pligi, this Brisa clearly also goes against Rav. But let's take him. And Rav has no answer to explain it. You have to say, argues with him. The Rav said, Kol Haloshon, anything which is forbidden, that even in hidden is forbidden. This Brisa allows you to use a drain when there's no worry that people will see the water going from it into the street, despite the fact that you're not allowed to do it when the water goes to a place where people are passing by. So this Brisa clearly holds that a master which is also because of Maris Ayin is permitted to do it in a private area. To be continued. Next year is on Tuesday, Rabbi Say.